Hi, folks. So this is the screencast that will take you through number one of the Unit 10 note guide. And there is some overlap here because we're doing culture, and we did talk some about culture in the previous unit and influences on art from after World War One. So this definitely overlaps a little bit with that. Just to remind you, this is our time period, and we are going to be looking at the rise of totalitarianism in this unit, and we'll also be looking at it a little bit in the artwork. So lost generation is a term that we were introduced to last unit, and it is from a quote referring by an intellectual, I think it was Gertrude Stein, to the rest of them, saying that they're just all lost. And here are some examples of authors who we still read today. They still have a universal sort of relevance, but they are also very much of their time period, influenced by the history and the context in which they were writing. Ernest Hemingway, who had volunteered to fight in World War I even before the United States entered it, and continued to, well, it doesn't matter what he continued to do. Anyways, not going to go down that rabbit hole of what other wars he fought in. So he wrote The Sun Also Rises, and A Call to Arms, A Farewell to Arms, and For Whom the Bell Tolls. So bunch of different books, and F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby, which I believe you'll be reading next year. Both of their writing styles are characterized by what we would see as much more modern writing, much less description and more plot-driven, punchier, more straight talking, more dialogue. And here we have a quote from Vera Bretton, who is describing the time period. So she says, "For me, as for all the world, the war was a tragedy and a vast stupidity." So just think about that and compare that to those images we saw of all the people cheering to go off to war. And now that's not their perspective anymore. It was a waste of youth and of time. It betrayed my faith, mocked my love, and irremediably spoilt my career. So the war as not just stopping everything, and we know something about having everything stop living through this pandemic, but destroying everything. It was an interruption that was of lasting harm. Even if you survived it, you weren't the same. That was generally the feeling, especially among young people in the 1920s who were most impacted either through fighting in the war or having boyfriends, brothers, colleagues who fought. And then I have two Ernest Hemingway quotes. They're unrelated, but they give you a sense of his thinking and his writing style. So in writing about writing, he says, "There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed." And then the other one is, "The world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong at the broken places." So he's a little different in the model of the Lost Generation because he's not like broken and that's the end of the story. Like, he very much is, well, he's a tragic figure because he coped with depression his whole life until he commits suicide, but he tries to battle it down and believes that like real men fight and shoot animals and bury their feelings and things like that. You see that time and again in his characters. So that second quote gives you a little bit of an insight into him and his values. He also, I'm just going to share this while I'm babbling anyway. He challenged people to see how short they could write a whole story. There's, I think, like a 6-word story contest going on still today. And he initially threw down the challenge with this as, what was it? It was a classified ad, like an ad, like a Craigslist ad to resell something. And this is what he said was a story in 6 words. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. And that was a 6-word story. I'll give you a minute to think about that one. Ponder it. You can pause the screencast and join me on the next slide. Okay, so James Joyce and Franz Kafka are the other 2 people I pulled out for you to add to your note guide. And here are 2 quotes that I'll allow you to read on your own, either by pausing now or when I'm done explaining. And what you want to know about them is that their writing is heavily influenced by the anxiety of the time period. You even describe it as an age of anxiety. They are people like Hemingway and Fitzgerald who challenge conventions and write in a new style. They all also question traditional values, question traditions and norms, maybe have extreme social or political beliefs. And specifically for James Joyce, one of his famous works, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I will confess I've never read this. It always seemed kind of intimidating to me. Somehow I got through high school and college not reading it. But I think it's a good read. It features the rebelling of a young Irishman against his religion, his Catholic religion, which was an important part of the Irish society, and also against the conventions, the societal norms that he grew up with. And this eventually results in his character's exile. Franz Kafka, I have read some of his work, and he has a certain pattern. Like, usually the hero or protagonist of his story is someone who's very isolated or alone, feeling very alienated from the society that that person, usually he, lives in, and frustrated with the pointlessness, the absurdity of life. Okay? And yeah, those quotes give you a little better sense. Take a minute to read them, and I'll meet you on the next slide. All right. Now, in last unit, we talked about Cubism and Surrealism as art styles of this time period. Surreal, remember, is like trying to paint a dream, influenced by Freud. Cubism originates before World War I. So we can't say that it's all shaped by the context of the horrors of World War I. But Dadaism we can. Dadaism comes out during and after World War I, and it is very shaped by it. Its main purpose is to question whether there is any purpose in life. So to embrace the possibility that life is purposeless, which puts it directly at odds with faith, because faith, whether it's Christian or Jewish or Muslim, is a search for meaning in life. And Dadaists are completely irreverent. If we started the Renaissance by saying, all right, these artists don't put God center, but they still believe, and in Enlightenment, they still believe, Dadaists do not believe in God. They do not believe in a purpose in life, in any overarching moral code or afterlife. And this quote from one of the founders, from a Dadaist artist, said, like life, Dada is useless. So they are not trying to create art that makes you think that life has a purpose. They're trying to create art that makes you confused and wonder what it all means. So trying to capture insanity, almost even being anti-art. On the left we have Hannah Höch, who as a female artist also places gender identity into it, like what is the role of women in society, getting people to think about that. In this particular image, I don't think you can say too much about it. There are some female figures here. What I think I love best about this artwork of hers is the title, because like by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, okay, I have no idea what cut with the Dada kitchen knife through the last Weimar beer belly cultural epoch in Germany even means. Is it a sentence? It's like a word art that you get all the way through it and you're like, yeah, no, I have no idea what she's trying to say. And she would say, that's exactly what I was trying to say. And then on the right with Duchamp, we have a fountain. So just the, and you see this bleeding into or carrying on in the 20th century with pop art. And even like there's a type of pop art that's like trash art, where can anything be art? Can anything that we look at in a particular way and anoint with our attention be art? If you stop to look at a fountain, a lot went into making it. It's engineering. It speaks of our time. It reflects our society. So why not? Why not call it art? So really breaking down the barriers between, like, the status of creating. Like, there is no status to creating. There is no elevation to art. It should be seamless with what's in our life. All right. Just a little bit about this context that we're making people feel so hopeless about things. There is, and I think you guys have studied this before and seen this image also, there is hyperinflation in Germany because they have to pay back the Allied nations for the war. So they keep generating more money, they keep printing more money. So money becomes worth less and less because, well, how can I explain this? The paper is just representational. So even if you had $1,000, you if there wasn't enough bread, you still wouldn't be able to have that $1,000 be what it's worth. Or let me look at it this way. Housing in the Bay Area. You can have a lot of money. You can earn a good salary in the Bay Area. If there's not a house to move into, it doesn't matter how much money you make. So think about that not just for houses, but for everything they had to buy. They had the money, but their economy wasn't going, so that their farms weren't going. They didn't have the goods. So everyone competed, and they're like, oh my God, I need to have that last slab of meat. I'll pay you anything for it. And so that's where you run into all of these problems. So that in this image you see a woman burning cash because it's cheaper than using the cash to try and buy firewood. Like, she'll actually stay warm longer burning these pieces of paper than what these pieces of paper would get her in firewood. Okay, so obviously this is a situation, this is an issue. You don't have Ruhr crisis in your note guide, but just briefly to touch on it, Germany did try to just stop repaying the money, which I'm sure if you know anyone with student debt loans, they can tell you they've tried that also. So they did try and do this. This leads to France becoming very upset with them and occupying the Ruhr Valley, which is on Germany's border with France. Okay, let's move on. Oops. So this anxiety, this instability is going to lead to an age of totalitarianism, which we'll be studying more. So what you see here, let me use this map. Spain, whoops, that should be Spain. Hang on, let me try this. Oh, my pen died. All right, sorry. I won't try and be fancy. Spain, Italy, and the Soviet Union all become totalitarian during the 30s, the 20s and 30s. And that is a type of dictatorship where the dictators control all aspects of life, not just the government. What you read, limiting free press, limiting the music, affecting societal values. Yeah. So interesting question here. What made people turn to totalitarianism? Was it a search for certainty, security, like meaning? Sorry, I shouldn't have made those equivalent because the question asks either one. So security, that safety feature, or meaning in a time that felt purposeless. I'll go through this quickly. Again, it's not in your note guide. We talked about Nietzsche already, just to connect him to this time period in Germany, because he is German. He had a theory of the Superman, or what in German would be the Übermensch. And this idea of the Superman is not Marvel Comics, but rather the idea that through struggle and even chaos, those who survive are the Supermen. So similar to social Darwinism, and again a rationalization for exploiting other people or treating people how you want. I'm doing this because the philosophers say that this is what you need to do during struggle. All right. So in fascism, it's really actually Mussolini in Italy who rises to power first. And it's so interesting. We have this Italian-German split again, like we had back in the Renaissance, where the Italian attention is to, we will rebuild and we will be as great as the Roman Empire. And that was a big part of Mussolini's selling point. And Rome is known for a lot of things. He highlights their military. He's like, we will be as good a military as Rome. So he's very military oriented. And Hitler, same thing as with the Northern Renaissance, he's not going to want to reclaim we're going to be as good as the Roman days, because during the Roman days, the Germans were the barbarians. So he highlights we will rebuild and we will be the Third Reich. The Second Reich being Bismarck's German Empire, and the First Reich, I believe, he's going back to the Holy Roman Empire. So he is going back through German history and saying, yes, we lost World War I, but we can rebuild. Here was when we were great in the past, and we can be great again. All right. Now, in your note guide, you have these features listed already. And I actually don't need you to add anything to them. If you're curious, the term fasces, Latin in origin, comes from a bundling of sticks, and it's pictured there on the left. And the idea behind fascism is strength in numbers, but really the subsuming the unimportance of the individual. So it's what matters is what we can form together, like who cares about each little individual stick in this handle? What matters is the handle being strong enough to hold that axe blade, as you see in the picture. So you individually, your rights, who you are as a person, do not matter as much as the importance of the state. That takes us to number 5 here. The state matters more than the individual, and this is best achieved by each of us being disciplined enough to take our place in our little bundle. And very really, this is how military operates, right? It's not about the individual soldier as much as it is about the drilling and the discipline of the whole army. What else? This is a type of government that values strength more than it values liberty or what else did the Enlightenment? It's very much the opposite of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment valued liberty and rights and rational discourse, and this is obedience and strength. And because the individual doesn't matter, what you really need is you need a charismatic leader. You need someone who's going to make you want to follow them more than you're going to want to listen to yourself or to have your own thoughts. We've moved past romantic nationalism. We've moved past realpolitik nationalism, where it was just the practicality of nationalism, and now we've really moved into a nationalism that's racial, that's racist, where it's not only should we be together because we're similar to each other, but we should be together because we are the best and no one else is as good as us. And anyone who is not us needs to be removed. Okay, so those are the elements of fascisms that you see in both Italy and Germany, originating though in Italy with Mussolini. Now, this also is on your note guide as bullet points, and this time I do want you to add notes. I thought, in our cultural piece, I would make this connection of posters and propaganda from both the artistic as well as the artistic analysis as well as analyzing the meaning. Let's start artistically. Artistically, this is very modern. It's very clean lines. It's what you think of nowadays as graphic design, where this isn't trying to be realistic looking. It's cartoonish on the left. It's very flat dimensions on the right. It's using blocks of color or a black outline and limited choice of color. So if you compare it to like Baroque, where they're really trying to make the silks and the velvets seem real, this is almost intentionally trying to not look real. But why? Well, it's trying to be evocative. It's trying to convey a message of strength. And art's always interested in being different than what's come before it. So this is like on the left, it's a cartoon. The ship is looking scared. Its little hole, its anchor hole is almost like an eyeball looking back in fear. So it's using all of this to be editorial or express an emotion. This is Italian, but you see very similar in Soviet and Nazi in terms of the artistic quality. Again, dark lines, flat, no vanishing point, a mix of words and images, which you saw in Italian also. Here the message is in, yes, we're in this together. You don't matter as much as individually as you do as part of the state. But another thing you see a lot in Soviet propaganda is women's rights, promoting women as workers. This was not culturally the reality in Russia at the time, but it is a part of Marxism. Marxist doctrine does not say that women should be second-class citizens or women should stay home and be taken care of. So you see over and over again in Soviet propaganda images of like women being as strong as men, women being as useful and as important as productive members of society as the men are. And on the left, that's Lenin, and that's dirigibles, which are like hot air balloons, which were competitive with planes. Like eventually planes are what we would choose to use because these do not serve us as well. But at the time, like the dirigible, the hot air balloon, there's a little space at the bottom that people would be in. It could hold as many people as the planes of those days, so it was a thing. Zeppelin's another name for it, which is where the band Led Zeppelin gets its name from. All right, finally, Nazi fascism. So again, with the flatness, with the color blocking, limited colors, a little more representational, whereas this is completely like one color for her skin tone. I guess Lenin is shaded. Here we see with both of these guys, they're more shaded in. Yeah, the guy on the, where is it? The blonde guy here on the left is his shading is color blocked, but this guy's a little more realistic looking. Content, beauty, the beauty norm. This was such a key element of Hitler's fascism, was not just promoting we are the strongest, but that we are the fittest and the most beautiful. So over and over again, this idea that Aryan nation, that we are deserving of ruling the world, not just because we have the military or we have the ability to, but because we're the best looking. So weirdly, that whole superficial piece gets mixed in with it. But it does provide a chance for Hitler to focus on those who are not beautiful enough. The non-blonde, blue-eyed, gypsies, Slavic people, and most noticeably Jewish people. So let's go and look at that. Oh, and we just say this little state of deception thing here, in case you were looking at that, that's wouldn't have been in the original propaganda. I apologize, I didn't get a clean version of this. There's only so much you want to hunt for Nazi propaganda online before you start to worry that scary things are going to be in your cookies. So I did just take this, but this little state of deception, the power of Nazi propaganda, was put on by the Holocaust Museum after its creation. Okay, so Nazi propaganda against Jewish people, this is from the very beginning when Hitler writes Mein Kampf, the book about his struggle, who is to blame? The Jewish people. And it is woven throughout his entire rise to power. I mean, if you make a comparison to Trump, even before Trump was elected, he's caught on recordings as saying that horribly derogatory thing about preying on women and grabbing them by the, I guess I can say it, he said it, grabbing them by the pussy. He says that, it, and yet people vote for him and they assume, well, that's not really who he's going to be. And the reason why I bring this up is because I think it was very similar with Hitler. People didn't vote for him necessarily because he hated Jews, but they voted for the other ideas, and they figured, well, that Jewish hating thing, that's his extreme point of view. He's not going to act on it that much. And for the smaller extreme groups who are like, yay, he's finally saying he hates Jews. Yeah, that is why they voted for him. But for others, for your wealthy Germans, they just thought this is a guy who can bring law and order. He's going to make Germany great again. He's going to do these things that are in our favor. Dehumanization. So you see a lot of dehumanization in the characterization of the Jewish man-woman here and the Jewish man here, playing on the stereotype of Jewish people having big noses. You see in both exaggeration of the cultural aspect of wearing beards, making it seem kind of dirty. The interest in money is referenced here with his hand out for money. This, this androgyny here is very interesting because on the one hand, it's a very masculine looking woman, but it's also a very feminized looking man. So if we say it's a woman, you would say that, the Jewish women are unnatural. And if you say that it's a man with cleavage, then it's a way of making the man look more like a sissy. So you could see it either way. And then the perfect specimen of the German soldier and the stabbed in the back myth that it was Jewish peoples who negotiated the terms of the surrender and brought about Germany's defeat in World War I. These images can be seen, I think, even at points in Germany as overtly anti-Semitic. But there were other elements. It wasn't just these super anti-Semitic things. It was how deeply it was woven in. And this, I think, is worth mentioning because it doesn't just happen in Nazi Germany. So let's take one example. Children's board games. Children's board games, the bad guy was the Jewish character. And you'd think, like, why would they believe that? That seems so random. But, like, who are the bad guys in our movies? Like, what accents do they have? And it's usually not an accident. Like, when I was a teenager, they all had Russian accents because we were in the Cold War. Then for a while, they were all Muslim terrorists because of 9/11. So these elements are sort of subconscious, but they plant a seed and they affect how we see things. Maybe you've played the board game Monopoly, and maybe you've never even realized it, but like, why are some of the properties in Monopoly worth more than others? The properties in Monopoly that are worth less, that are right at the beginning of the board, right by go, were the African American neighborhoods. And you know, you don't know Atlantic City, you wouldn't know that. But it's there, it's embedded. And that's just one example of so many ways that a society layers in prejudice once it's established. You know, people talk about good neighborhoods or good schools in the United States and safe neighborhoods. Like, what's a safe neighborhood? Is a safe neighborhood the same thing no matter what race you are? Because if a safe neighborhood is one where you're not worried about getting harmed, not worried about physical damage, being robbed, being hurt, that's really different for different people. So anyways, I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I just wanted to make the point that in Nazi Germany, just like in the United States today, the layers of the anti-Semitism are not just these overt elements. There are so many layers that build in this distrust of each other. All right, that's my piece. I will see you in class next week. Enjoy your long weekend.